Yeah, so this is interesting to actually give this presentation just after the previous panel. So thank you very much for the confidence in M2 that was expressed just earlier. Now look, I've got a clicker. That's good. Not sure it works. I don't think that works. So look, 2022 was obviously a very interesting year for crypto. A lot of investors have taken devastating losses. A lot of other people think it was actually a very necessary year. It was providing the necessary cleansing for some of the excesses that have been in the space for the years before that. Now, let's take a brief look at what actually happened. It probably started at the end of 2021 with the beginning of the quantitative tightening. So interest rates went up, money left the space, liquidity was withdrawn, and in the consequence, over 2022, the price of Bitcoin or the total crypto market cap decreased by about 65%. Consequently, of course, those players who were quite leveraged and exposed quickly found themselves in distress, and there was many of them. Now, all it took at the time was just one major event that started tipping them over the line. That event, of course, was Terra Luna. For those of you who don't know, it was the underlying asset of a stablecoin, an algorithmic stablecoin called UST, which depegged, spiraled downwards, and eventually completely crashed. That took out about 60 billion in market cap within a matter of 2 or 3 days. Of course, that then tipped the first ones over the lines. The first one was one of the flagships in the crypto space back then, an investor called 3 Arrows Capital. They had big exposure to Terra Luna, were already stretched and quite faced with margin calls, and as a consequence, had to close shop. That was the first one. Then it hit those companies that were lending to 3 Arrows Capital. Voyager was the first one. They took a hit of 675 million within a couple of days as well. Had to file bankruptcy. And then the chain began. One domino fell after another. It was Celsius next. Then, of course, Alameda. Now look, Alameda, of course, is a whole different story in the way it took down FTX. There's more to be talked about that. In fact, films are being made out of it right now. So I'll leave that to another time and place. But nevertheless, clearly the demise of that, again, sent other lenders onto their knees, BlockFi, Genesis, etc. So let's take a look at what were the underlying issues, what caused all this ripple effect. And of course, there's a lot of small issues and a number of angles to look at. But in my mind, the two key aspects that really triggered everything comes down to two things. The first one is good old risk management. It is clear that some of the behaviors there were still triggered by the intoxicating effects of 2021. Everybody got really rich really fast. People were still believing for that to be able to continue. And we're prioritizing short-term profits over long-term risk management. There was lame lending, especially players like 3 Arrows or SBF were getting funding and loans without any proper due diligence being conducted, pure name lending, because the belief was so strong in their capabilities. But more importantly, we all know that crypto is a volatile asset. That's why we're in there, that's why we like it. It has great upside opportunities, but it also has the downside risks. Now, those risks need to be managed and mitigated. It's the management of market risk, of counterparty risk, concentration risk, and there's easy ways of doing this. But clearly, that's the part that those players that were suffering in 2022 did not have in place. So that's a key thing in my mind that was missing. The other one, and that goes back to the regulatory discussion, is transparency. A lot of investors did not know when they lend or invest into a certain platform in what shape the organization or the protocol or the project was actually in, how much risk exposure they already had, how much leverage they had, how much unrealized losses they already had on the balance sheet. In some cases, they weren't even aware that that vendor or that partner was already moving assets off the platform. So an investor thought it's on the platform, it was given to third parties, which completely changes the risk profile. So the risk-benefit analysis, or risk-adjusted returns assessment, couldn't even be conducted by investors because they didn't know what the risk they were dealing with in the first place. So in my mind, those are the two key aspects that really challenged or set off the negative impact on the evolution of things in 2022. Now, what can we learn and what should we do differently when we invest now? And of course, some could say, well, the culprits of back then are wiped out. It's cleansed, right? The cleansing has happened. They're no longer there. So the guys that survived, the guys that are still here, clearly knew their risk management. They've done their homework. They survived. They knew what they were doing. So they definitely, that's a starting point to trust. And that's probably a good strategy. Stick with the survivors. They've proven that they can weather the storms. So they're a good place to invest. Now, the challenge of that is crypto is a very dynamic and exciting place. So a lot of the investors don't want to just stick with what has been around for long. They are looking for new opportunities and benefit from the upside, from the exciting opportunities that crypto offers. So how then, as an investor, do you select new projects, new investment opportunities in everything that can happen? And the key thing I would personally look for is make sure you know who you're dealing with, make sure the risk management is in place, and make sure it is in a clear and regulated place. The reason I'm saying the third one is, of course, there's opportunities in DeFi as well in other places, especially for those that are new to crypto. It's hard to figure out. There's usually not enough information easily available to really assess the risk, to really understand the risk-benefit return ratio. When dealing with, and of course, being a fully regulated player, I'm talking my own shop here in full disclosure, but if you invest in companies or with companies that are in a fully regulated jurisdiction, obviously you have some protection from the from the supervisor in that jurisdiction. And of course, Abu Dhabi and the ADGM, as we heard many times before today, is the oldest and one of the most reputable regulators in the world. So there's strict regulation in terms of what has to be disclosed, what can be done, security and protection of the platform and the users. So investing with somebody in these jurisdictions is a much safer bet to start with. The second thing I'd probably look for is the management team. Look for teams that have been around long enough, who've weathered storm, who've been lying in the trenches bleeding after a crisis, who've experienced and know how to build policies, procedures, and systems that last for longevity, not for short-term profit. That's the second key thing. The third one, in terms of minimizing risks, is also check if there's audited financial statements. Once you have an investment or you invest in somebody who can produce audited financial statements, of course, the risk of numbers being misrepresented or not being accurate is much, much reduced because there's an independent third-party verification of those numbers. Now, having talked a lot about the gloomy side of things, we're now in a much better place than 2022. Just this year so far, Bitcoin has actually gone up in value by, just checked this morning, 128%. So those of us who had the stomach to hold on to our Bitcoins and other things actually doubled our money this year, which is a much, much better feeling than what it felt like in 2022. And even looking forward now, we are at the verge of several major spot ETFs being approved, probably in January, of which everybody expects a lot of institutional capital to enter the market. Other than that, of course, it's also probably the end of quantitative tightening. We're not easing it, but at least the tightening seems to be over, which again is beneficial for the sector. And finally, the next halvening is about to happen early next year. That historically has always been the beginning of major upward cycles for the crypto industry. With all that, future looks bright. I wish all of you successful and safe investments. Thank you very much.